Hello. On November 12th, 2015, a brutal battle erupted in one of Honduras' most notorious prisons. Blood stained the concrete floors as cries echoed off the cold iron walls. In the aftermath, 11 lives were lost, 31 were injured, and the remains of many victims were left unrecognizable. Some were decapitated, others mutilated, and some bodies were thrown to vicious guard dogs. The unfortunate victims were all members of the infamous MS-13 gang. The attackers were their fierce rivals, the equally ruthless 18th Street gang. Among the ranks of 18th Street were young recruits, including the latest addition, Little Mousy, who was only 9 years old. This gang had long since transformed into a transnational criminal syndicate, although few would guess it began on the streets of Los Angeles in the 1950s. It became the first multiracial gang in the United States, led not by a single leader, but by experienced veteranos, who commanded local factions under harsh, unyielding rules. Break one of these rules, you'd face either 18 brutal seconds of assault or an unforgiving death. What set 18th Street apart wasn't just its violence, but also its ability to attract younger and younger recruits. Predators in their ranks preyed on vulnerable middle school students, those on the fringes of society. Easily influenced and overlooked, they painted a glamorous picture of power, excitement, and the thrill of violence, luring these young minds to believe that this path would make them invincible. At first, the recruits felt intoxicated by a sense of invincibility, taking what they wanted, killing without remorse, as if they ruled the world. But eventually, harsh reality set in, confronting them with the cold walls of a prison cell or the ever-present threat of a violent death. While drug trafficking remains their main source of income, 18th Street's criminal activities are vast and unrelenting: murder, assault, arson, extortion, human trafficking, kidnapping, robbery, and arms dealing. In Los Angeles alone, at least one attack or robbery each day is linked to this gang. In Central American countries, where weak governments allow gangs to operate unchecked, 18th Street spreads its terror daily, turning entire neighborhoods into battle zones. In the US, joining the gang might mean undertaking dangerous drug transport missions. But in Central America, loyalty is measured in blood. New members must be willing to kill. Each year, 18th Street is responsible for thousands of deaths, using violence and extortion to control neighborhoods, forcing countless people to flee just to survive. Those who belong to the 18th Street gang are more than just hardened criminals. They are cold-blooded killers, unfazed by the innocent lives they destroy. Now, let me take you into the story of one of the most terrifying figures in gang history, Rocky Lee Glover, a man whose ruthless legacy has left an indelible mark on the world of organized crime. Rocky Lee Glover is a name that still sends chills down the spines of those who know it. Originally, he was a member of the Clanton 14 gang, a notorious Los Angeles gang dating back to the 1920s. But Glover had bigger ambitions. Not long after joining, he devised a bold plan to expand the gang's reach by allowing non-Mexican members to join. This decision was seen as a betrayal by Clanton 14, and they quickly expelled him. Refusing to go quietly, Glover and a handful of loyal followers broke away to form their own gang, 18th Street. And thus, a brutal feud ignited between 18th Street and Clanton 14, a relentless conflict that transformed the streets of Los Angeles into bloody battlegrounds. Innocent bystanders often became pawns in this violent struggle for power, caught in the crossfire of a deadly gang war. On the morning of September 18th, 1980, Michael Mitchell and his wife, Dora, were in their second-floor apartment when sudden gunshots shattered the quiet. Courageux by nature. Michael ran to the balcony to check if anyone needed help, while Dora, oblivious to the horror about to unfold, went into the bathroom to change. When Dora emerged, she was met with an unimaginable sight. Her beloved husband lay lifeless on the floor, blood spreading across the tiles. His body still. Michael had been killed in an instant by Rocky Lee Glover, the notorious leader of 18th Street, mistakenly believing Michael was a Clanton 14 member. Glover shot him dead from a distance, extinguishing an innocent life in a heartbeat. A month later, Rocky Lee Glover was arrested and sentenced to 25 years to life. Yet, to this day, his whereabouts remain a mystery. Some say he is still behind bars. Others claim he's been released. Whatever the truth, his dark legacy endures. Those loyal to Glover carry on his ruthless ideals, spreading fear across communities worldwide. On the quiet night of August 9th, 1998, LAPD officers Philbert Cuesta and Richard Gabaldon were patrolling Los Angeles. As they waited for backup outside a wedding reception, they spotted a group of suspicious individuals, members of the 18th Street Gang. But they had no idea that death was lurking in the shadows. A hail of bullets suddenly erupted from the darkness, shattering the window and piercing Officer Cuesta's body. His last breath slipped away by morning, leaving behind a grieving wife and 2 young children who would never understand why he had to die so cruelly. Gabaldon, though wounded, survived, carrying with him a lifetime of haunting pain. The man responsible for this cold-blooded ambush was none other than 23-year-old Caterino Gonzalez Jr., a member of 18th Street. At his trial, Gonzalez claimed he acted out of fear, thinking the officers were there to arrest him for violating probation. But the truth ran deeper than his defense. At the time, Gonzalez was on probation for a drug-related charge, and it was Officer Cuesta who had been responsible for his previous arrest. He could never shake off the sting of that humiliation, and when he spotted Officer Cuesta sitting in the patrol car, a dark idea ignited in his mind. Without hesitation, he decided to carry out a cold-blooded act of revenge. He stealthily circled the entire block, launching his assault from behind and killing Cuesta with chilling ruthlessness. To make things even more disturbing, just 5 days before the murder, Gonzalez had been arrested for public intoxication. The next day, police found strange markings sprayed in graffiti, suggesting he had been planning his retaliation. These signs made it all the more likely that Gonzalez had been preparing for this attack long in advance. With Cuesta as his first target, after a tense trial, the judge handed down the maximum sentence: life in prison without parole. This was the price he paid for his monstrous crime. Since that day, Gonzalez has lived behind the cold walls of a prison, facing the consequences alongside other gang killers. Yet, the haunting memory of Officer Cuesta's death may follow him, regardless of where he is. The 18th Street Gang is infamous not only for its violent grip over Los Angeles neighborhoods, but also for the merciless methods it employs to extract money from drug dealers and local vendors. The gang enforces a mandatory tax on sales in their territory, promising protection from rival gangs. Those who refuse to comply face deadly consequences, often with their lives on the line. Even legitimate businesses aren't spared, forced to pay fees to continue operating in the gang's domain. On September 8, 2007, a street vendor refused to pay the gang's $50 tax, sparking a brutal incident. Juan Pablo Murillo, a feared member of 18th Street, was ordered to punish the vendor. On a bright afternoon, Murillo pulled out a gun and shot the vendor without hesitation. Though the victim survived, the violence didn't end there. In the ensuing chaos, a baby, just 23 days old, who had been peacefully sleeping in a stroller nearby, was tragically struck by a stray bullet. Little Luis Garcia did not survive, perishing instantly in an act of violence that defied all forgiveness. Murillo couldn't escape responsibility for his heinous actions. He was arrested and sentenced to life without parole, a punishment for the senseless brutality he had inflicted. Yet Murillo's story was only one chapter in the ongoing terror spread by 18th Street. Its other members, undeterred, continued to unleash gunfire and destruction, casting a shadow of fear over entire communities. Another heartbreaking tragedy linked to 18th Street was the death of Jamil Shaw, a young sports prodigy. Jamil was an exceptional high school athlete, excelling not only in football but also in basketball, baseball, track, and even piano. He was a true star with dreams of college and a national football career. His dedication earned him attention from top universities, paving the way for a promising future. But tragedy struck one evening as Jamil was on his way home. He was brutally murdered by Pedro Espinoza, a member of the 18th Street Gang. Jamil's death was a devastating blow, not only to his family and friends, but also to a society forced to confront the unchecked brutality and inhumanity of those living outside the law. In a single moment, his dreams, hopes, and bright future were extinguished. Everything in Jamil Shah's life, a young and brilliant talent with boundless potential, seemed destined for greatness. He was the pride of his family, a remarkable athlete poised to reach the pinnacle of sports. It all came to a tragic end on March 2nd, 2008, as Jamil was heading home from his daily practice. He was only 3 blocks from his house when he got a call from his father. In that fleeting moment, life and death seemed to intersect. Before he could react, 2 rough-looking strangers sprang out from a vehicle and blocked his path. One of them was Pedro Espinoza, a member of the 18th Street Gang. Without any words or hesitation, Espinoza coldly fired a shot into Jamil's stomach. Jamil collapsed, clutching his head defensively, trying to shield himself. But Espinoza didn't stop. He fired again, the bullet tearing through Jamil's hand and cruelly striking him in the face. Death came swiftly, mercilessly. In that instant, the sound of gunfire pierced the night, as if foretelling what was to come. Jamil's father rushed out, only to cradle his beloved son as he took his final breath. That harrowing image was etched into the father's memory, a pain beyond words. Within an hour, Espinoza was captured, but the price Jamil had paid was beyond measure. On May 23, 2012, Espinoza was sentenced to death. He showed no remorse, admitting he had mistaken Jamil's red Spider-Man backpack for gang colors and was ready to kill anyone in his misguided allegiance to his gang. In the brutal world of the 18th Street Gang, absolute loyalty is the only rule. Those who dare to betray it rarely survive to tell their stories. Another tale is that of Jonathan Figueroa, an 18th Street member. On October 24, 2017, Jonathan was forced to travel from New York City to Kingston, New York, with an accomplice. Once they arrived, they walked into the Turkey Point State Forest, where a nightmarish scene awaited. Jonathan endured horrific torture. His body was stabbed over 100 times, his ears severed and his throat slashed deeply. By the time they buried him in a shallow grave in the woods, his face was unrecognizable. What could have led to such brutal punishment? The answer lay in the bloody code of the 18th Street Gang. Jonathan was suspected of betrayal, believed to have cooperated with law enforcement. Walter Alfaro Pineda, a fearsome veteran in the gang, was behind the killing. He not only ordered Jonathan's execution, but also had the scene filmed to send a bloody warning to any would-be traitors. Little did he know that this decision would ultimately be his downfall. The FBI quickly seized the video, leading to the arrest of everyone involved. A year later, Alfaro was deported to El Salvador after authorities discovered he was wanted for murder and other serious crimes. But Jonathan Figueroa's tragic end was only one of countless bloody stories within the 18th Street Gang's domain, where betrayal is never forgiven and death is the price for questioning gang power. On November 29, 2019, a distress call sent Montgomery County Police on an urgent investigation. A hiker passing through a desolate area in Maryland had discovered the lifeless body of a young woman, 19-year-old Sarah Gutierrez Villatoro. The scene was eerily quiet, yet it hid a bloody tale that only gang members could have orchestrated. As police examined the body, they found Sarah had been shot multiple times, a cold-blooded and merciless killing. Evidence revealed that as many as 8 members of the 18th Street Gang had been seen near Sarah's home on the day of her murder. But even more chilling, 3 weeks prior, this same group had appeared here, searching for a woman to take her life. So, what did Sarah do to provoke such wrath from these men? The answer lies in a romantic relationship that led her into tragedy. Sarah had once been in love with a member of the 18th Street Gang, but their relationship ended in suspicion and hatred. Her ex-boyfriend started to believe Sarah had betrayed him, suspecting her of contacting a member of MS-13, the gang's arch-rival. And for this faint suspicion, Sarah would ultimately pay with her life. The police quickly arrested 4 suspects involved in the case: Jordan Ryan Moreno, the leader, Jonathan Rivera Escobar, Giovanni Dominguez Escobar, and a 16-year-old named Erigoberto Machado, who was tried as an adult. Each of their testimonies tore open the case's secrets. exposing unimaginable cruelty. Moreno, the mastermind, pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, confessing that he had orchestrated the plan leading to Sarah's death. Investigators continued to piece together the events of that fateful night. On the evening of November 21st, 2019, Sarah's boyfriend, an accomplice, called her to meet. He lured her from Washington to an isolated area in Maryland, where no one could hear her cries for help. In a desolate forest where time seemed to stand still, Moreno showed no hesitation as he aimed his gun at Sarah's head and face, coldly pulling the trigger and leaving her lifeless. In an instant, a beautiful life was cruelly snuffed out. Yet, the horrors of the 18th Street Gang didn't stop here. After witnessing Sarah's death, you might think nothing could be more brutal. But brace yourself, as we now confront one of the bloodiest, most ruthless crimes this gang ever committed. Their brutality knows no bounds, and death is just one part of the bloody rules of the underground world they control. On May 3rd, 1993, a three-story building in Westlake, Los Angeles, erupted into a horrific blaze. This apartment complex was home to immigrant families, crowded together to save on rent. These residents not only faced the hardship of poverty, but were thrust into a nightmare beyond anything they had ever experienced. As flames engulfed the building, residents desperately fought to survive. Women screamed, throwing their children out of windows in the hope someone below would catch them. Other parents clung to bed sheets, tying them together to form makeshift ropes in a frantic attempt to escape. The scene was chaos. Shouts filled the air. Thick smoke stung eyes, and the fire seemed bent on consuming everything in its path. People tried to save each other, forming human chains to pull one another to safety. But the blaze was too fierce, quickly reducing everything to ashes. In the aftermath, the chilling numbers hit hard. Over 100 people lost their homes. More than 40 were injured, and at least 10 lives were tragically taken in the inferno. Among the dead were 2 pregnant women and 7 innocent children. Young lives ended far too soon. Yet, one question lingered. Who was responsible? From the start, rumors spread that the 18th Street Gang was behind the fire. The apartment complex was known for drug trafficking, and the building manager had finally had enough, choosing to report the criminal activities to the police. Authorities suspected the gang wanted to silence her, making the case even more complex. For years, the case languished, with no clues and no suspects. Then, in 1998, Akamempe, arrested in a separate murder case, shared critical information. He knew who was responsible for the fire. But it wasn't until 2000, when charges against 2 suspects, Rogelio Andrade and Alan Lobos, were dropped due to insufficient evidence, that the case truly turned into a mystery. In 2017, a shocking twist emerged. The police announced the arrest of 3 new suspects, all members of the 18th Street Gang. They confessed to manslaughter and admitted to their gang affiliations, sparking public questions about the 2 previously arrested men. Were they truly innocent? Was there a hidden truth we had yet to uncover? Although the case was finally closed, one thing remains certain: the 18th Street Gang continues to spread fear. The FBI estimates that the gang still has around 65,000 active members, operating fiercely on the streets across the US, Mexico, and Central America. One haunting question remains unanswered: how many more tragedies will unfold in the future at the hands of these bloodthirsty criminals? Only time will tell. But can we endure the truth when it's finally revealed? On March 18th, 2021, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel took their power struggle to a shocking new level, shaking all of Mexico. In a park in Guadalajara, police discovered a body tightly wrapped in black plastic with multiple gunshot wounds to the head. A bloody sign pinned to the victim's chest bore the chilling message: Traitor El Cholo. El Cholo, once a close lieutenant of El Menco, the CJNG kingpin, had dared to break away and form his own gang, directly challenging the infamous cartel. The CJNG, notorious for its relentless brutality, did not let it slide. The discovery of El Cholo's body was more than just a warning, it was a declaration. Anyone who dares to betray will meet the same fate. This was just one of countless times gangs dared to clash with Mexico's ruthless cartels. Another horrific example was the Acapulco massacre on January 8, 2011. Outside a famous shopping center, Mexican police found 15 male bodies, all brutally tortured. 14 of the victims had signs attached to them, signed by the Sinaloa cartel, led by El Chapo Guzman. The message was clear. The Sinaloa cartel had eliminated enemies standing in the way of their ambition to fully control the city and its drug routes. The South Pacific Cartel, which had emerged in 2010 as a branch of the Beltran-Leyva cartel, became the target of Sinaloa's wrath. Known for its grotesque violence, including recruiting a 12-year-old child as an executioner, this gang did not last long. Within a year, most of its members had either been arrested or killed in cold blood. The reason was simple. They dared to face one of the world's most merciless cartels. Since its founding in the late 1980s, the Sinaloa cartel, under the leadership of figures like El Chapo and Ismael El Mayo Zambada, had steadily expanded its power through bloody confrontations with rival cartels and even the Mexican government. Despite numerous arrests and drug seizures, but Sinaloa continued to thrive thanks to its sophisticated smuggling techniques, such as cross-border tunnels between the U.S. and Mexico. When El Chapo was captured for the third time after 2 bold prison escapes, the world finally began to grasp the boundless brutality of this man. In 2019, after being extradited to the U.S. for 3 years, El Chapo finally faced trial. One of the most shocking stories from the trial came from El Chapo's former bodyguard, Isaías Valdez Rios, nicknamed Memon. He recounted how El Chapo was a bloodthirsty man who never forgave any enemy, even if they had once been allies. 3 former Sinaloa cartel members, who had later switched to a rival gang, were savagely tortured by El Chapo for hours. He beat them until their bones shattered and their bodies were completely disfigured before shooting them in the head and throwing their corpses into a fire. This story is just the tip of the iceberg of the brutal violence of Mexico's cartels. In the battle for power, there is no room for weakness or betrayal. On November 18, 2023, the atmosphere in Tijuana was on the brink of exploding. A group of 6 local and state police officers hatched a reckless plan to steal a large shipment of drugs from the Sinaloa cartel, one of the most brutal cartels in the world. With unimaginable boldness, they betrayed their oath, not only becoming criminals, but deciding to take on Los Chapitos, the 3 sons of El Chapo and El Mayo Zambada, who have maintained the cartel's bloody grip on power, even with El Chapo locked in a maximum security prison in the U.S. Soon after the heist, it didn't take long for the Sinaloa cartel to figure out what had happened. Within hours, all of Tijuana was plunged into the shadow of revenge. An armed group unleashed a furious attack on the federal prosecutor's office with 30 bullets riddling the building. This was just the beginning. Not long after, a city police officer suspected of being involved in the heist was shot dead on the street. A cold, inevitable death. However, even that wasn't enough to quell the cartel's fury. On November 24th, another burst of gunfire tore through the silent air, striking the state prosecutor's office. Fortunately, no one was injured. 3 days later, death struck again. A state detective under investigation for his involvement in the heist was brutally shot inside his car while refueling. He seemed to have realized his fate just before the shooting, but all efforts to escape were futile. His car only moved a few meters before crashing into a lamppost, and he died slumped over the steering wheel. The killers fled on motorcycles, vanishing into the chaos of the night. The retaliation escalated, and not just one, but 2 other police officers were assassinated in broad daylight. One of them had refused to join the witness protection program, and the price he paid was his life. The cartel's vengeance never stops at just a few names, and Tijuana had become a bloody battleground, where every gunshot served as a reminder that no one could escape the Sinaloa cartel's retribution. This wasn't the first time the cartel clashed with the Mexican government. On October 17, 2019, the arrest of Ovidio Guzman Lopez, son of El Chapo, sparked the fury of more than 700 gunmen. They threatened to kill civilians en masse and attacked a military housing complex, forcing the government to release Ovidio just hours after his capture. The Mexican president was compelled to order his release to prevent further bloodshed. However, Ovidio's freedom didn't last long. In 2023, he was arrested again and extradited to the US, where he may spend the rest of his life in prison, just like his father. Though Ovidio was captured, but the Sinaloa cartel continues to operate powerfully. His two brothers, Ivan and Jesus Guzman Salazar, still run the drug empire, facing arrest warrants from both Mexico and the US. These chapitos not only continue their drug trafficking, but are also infamous for their cruelty in torturing their enemies. Reports from the U.S. Department of Justice reveal the brutal torture methods they use, from bottle capping, electric shocks to pouring hot chili peppers into their victims' wounds. Some unlucky ones were even fed to tigers, where it didn't matter whether they were dead or alive. Facing the cartel, whether as a cop or a farmer, always leads to a grim fate. On December 8th, 2023, in Texcaltitlan, a small village southwest of Mexico City, local residents could no longer endure the cartel's terror. Desperate and frustrated, they decided to rise up, arming themselves with whatever they could find. But the biggest question wasn't how long they could fight, but how the cartel would react when confronted with this unexpected rebellion. On December 8th, the tension in the village was palpable. A fierce clash erupted after the gang decided to double the tax they demanded from the poor farmers. The villagers had barely managed to pay the initial extortion fee, but this time the cartel's demands were beyond their capacity. The previous harvest had been disastrous, leaving them nearly destitute. One desperate farmer said, "We can't survive. If we don't fight, we'll starve to death anyway." With nothing left to lose, the villagers decided to resist the cartel. They gathered, armed with whatever they could, such machetes, sticks, old hunting rifles, all preparing for a life-or-death battle. The meeting was set at the local soccer field, usually a place for children to play, but today it had become a battlefield. The cartel arrived armed to the teeth, even wearing fake Mexican military uniforms to intimidate. But the courage and rage of the villagers were not easily crushed, as this was a fight for their very survival. To live or to die. Chaos erupted as soon as the first shot was fired. No one knew who shot first, but both sides immediately plunged into a bloody battle. Despite their crude weapons, but the farmers did not retreat. They charged forward with all the determination they could muster to face the ruthless criminals. The battle didn't last long, but it was enough to turn the soccer field into a sea of blood. When the gunfire subsided, a total of 14 people had fallen, including 4 farmers and 10 cartel members. Among the dead was Comandante Payaso, the brutal leader of La Familia Michoacana in the area, who had ordered the increase in extortion fees. When he fell, the remaining cartel members fled in fear, leaving behind their trucks and the bodies of their comrades, which the villagers did not hesitate to burn on the spot. Though victorious, but sorrow still enveloped the village. One resident said in frustration, "We called for help from the Mexican military. We knew this was going to happen, but no one came. We were abandoned." Their cries for help had been ignored, and the government had failed to protect them. This confrontation quickly captured public attention, especially with the presidential election approaching. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador blamed the situation on the growing drug consumption and argued that previous administrations had failed to take care of the youth. Meanwhile, candidate Xochitl Gálvez harshly criticized Obrador's hugs instead of bullets strategy, saying it left citizens like those in Texcaltitlan feeling abandoned. She stated, "The hugs are for criminals while the bullets are for the people." Regardless, the government decided not to prosecute the farmers involved in the clash, deeming it a legitimate act of self-defense. The village briefly felt relieved, but the terror soon returned. On December 27th, La Familia Michoacana retaliated by attacking the village at night, kidnapping 14 people, including police officers who were captured at a checkpoint, and a wounded villager from the previous clash. Then on January 16th, 2024, an unexpected turn of events occurred. Police received an anonymous call directing them to a chapel in San Miguel Zinacantepec, where they found 7 of the 14 kidnapped victims. These included 3 women and 4 children, who were discovered in surprisingly good condition, sitting quietly and waiting for the police to rescue them. What had truly happened to the others? And why did the rescued victims know nothing about where they had been held? The biggest question remained. Were the missing still alive, or had they met a gruesome fate for daring to stand up to the cartel? On January 11th, 2020, Karen Lisbeth Yepes Ortiz walked down the aisle. her face glowing with happiness, unaware that her special day was about to turn into the worst nightmare she could imagine. As she stood beside her husband, the notorious drug lord El Calamardo, the two exchanged vows in joy. But suddenly a group of armed men stormed into the church, turning the festive atmosphere into sheer panic. Gunshots echoed through the once peaceful space. The chaos sent everyone into a frenzy, and a bullet struck Karam, causing her to collapse in pain before the stunned eyes of the guests. Meanwhile, the groom was kidnapped by the assailants on the spot, leaving the crowd in disarray. But the situation was far worse than it seemed, as Karam was not only the wife of a drug lord, but also the sister of a notorious cartel leader. Her family had a long-standing feud with the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG. Though CJNG had only been established recently, it quickly rose to become one of the most brutal and influential gangs in Mexico. The Mexican government considered it one of the most dangerous organizations, second only to the Sinaloa cartel. The U.S. Department of Justice has also listed CJNG as one of the 5 most dangerous transnational criminal organizations in the world, responsible for countless deaths both in Mexico and at the U.S. border, all from their bloody hands. CJNG began in 2009 as an offshoot of the Milenio gang and quickly evolved into the most dangerous cartel. Its leader, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, also known as El Mencho, was once a police officer in Jalisco. His brutality wasn't just a means to an end, it was a twisted pleasure. This mentality permeated the entire organization, with CJNG spreading terror through acts of horrific violence such as massacres, acid baths, beheadings, and even cannibalism to train new assassins. One horrifying example occurred during rush hour in Veracruz, where 35 tortured and bound bodies were dumped on the streets as a warning to those who dared oppose them. In another brutal act, they killed a man and his son by strapping explosives to their bodies and blowing them up, filming the gruesome scene and laughing as they watched their victims' terrifying end. Karam's brother, Jose Antonio Yepes Ortiz, also known as El Maro, was the leader of the Santa Rosa de Lima cartel, notorious for stealing fuel from pipelines in Guanajuato. A bloody war erupted between CJNG and Santa Rosa de Lima when a banner appeared in Guanajuato threatening the president of Mexico to withdraw security forces from the state or there would be more bloodshed. El Maro quickly denied involvement, but El Mencho refused to believe him and was determined to destroy El Maro's gang. To carry out this goal, CJNG planned a massacre at Karam's wedding. And though the slaughter occurred amidst panic, but El Maro managed to escape without a trace, leaving his sister lying in a pool of blood. The grief and fury he must have felt were unimaginable. But El Maro couldn't hide forever. On August 2nd, 2020, he was captured in a joint operation between the Guanajuato government and Mexico's Public Security Department. Many believed the Santa Rosa de Lima cartel had been crushed, but subsequent events proved otherwise. The war had never truly ended, and ghosts from the past continued to haunt, igniting a storm of unprecedented violence in Mexico's cartel history. In January 2024, a shocking photo emerged circulating across Mexico, revealing a woman believed to be the current leader of the Santa Rosa de Lima cartel. She was suspected of orchestrating a series of massacres and attacks late last year in Guanajuato. From the armed assault on police that killed 2 officers to a firefight that claimed the lives of firefighters, and most notably the massacre at a festival in Salvadera, where 11 people were killed and 12 others injured. The most shocking detail? This woman was none other than Karam Elizabeth Yepes Ortiz. Rumors swirled with suspicion. How could this be? Some speculated she had faked her death to escape CJNG, waiting for the right time to gather enough strength for revenge. Others pointed out that authorities had never officially confirmed her death at the wedding. The sense of mystery deepened as officials remained silent, creating an atmosphere of tension. Whoever this woman truly was, it was clear she had stepped into a deadly war with CJNG, and the outcome was likely to be brutal, for CJNG neither forgives nor forgets. The following story serves as a chilling reminder of this truth. On March 18th, 2021, Mexican police discovered a horrifying scene. A body wrapped tightly in black trash bags abandoned in a park in Guadalajara. At first, the police thought it was just a dummy because the body was wrapped so tightly, but after closer inspection, they suspected it was none other than Carlos Enrique Sanchez Martinez, a notorious gangster in Mexico. How did they know? Next to the body were two handwritten signs, stabbed into the corpse with kitchen knives, bearing the chilling words, El Cholo, Sanchez Martinez's infamous nickname. He had once been a loyal member of CJNG, even rumored to be El Menco's right-hand man. However, driven by ambition and greed, El Cholo made the biggest mistake of his life, betraying CJNG. He was accused of ordering the murder of Marcos Hernandez, also known as El Colombiano, a key financial figure for CJNG. After El Colombiano discovered El Cholo's shady dealings and reported them to El Mencho, things quickly escalated. Soon after, El Cholo created his own gang, Nueva Plaza, with backing from CJNG's biggest enemy, the Sinaloa Cartel. These two groups launched bloody battles for control of territories. Now the question remains, if you were once part of CJNG and witnessed its brutality firsthand, would you dare stand against them? I can't imagine doing so, but El Cholo did, and he paid a steep price for his decision. On March 18th, 2021, a haunting video surfaced online showing a man in a red lacrosse shirt, sitting in a chair, looking defeated and resigned to his fate. Behind him stood a group of masked men armed and ready for what was about to happen. The man, later identified as El Cholo, began speaking as if reading from a script. He took responsibility for numerous crimes across Mexico, including an attack on the U.S. consulate. Not only did he openly admit his wrongdoings, but he also implicated several high-ranking police officers, claiming they had collaborated with him in attempts to bring down CJNG. One of the most notable names he mentioned was Omar Garcia Harfuca, a well-known officer famous for his tough tactics and unrelenting resolve in the fight against criminal gangs. The truth and the death lurking behind El Cholo's words seemed like a sentence waiting to be carried out. A chilling lesson in the brutality and betrayal of the criminal underworld, where there is no place for forgiveness. In June 2020, a violent attack nearly cost Harfuca his life. He was severely wounded, and the price he paid was even steeper as two of his close friends were killed in the brutal assault. This only fueled his hatred for CJNG, igniting a determination in him that the nation must continue its relentless battle against these cowardly criminal organizations. Shortly after the attack, the Attorney General of Mexico City arrested at least a dozen suspects tied to CJNG, but El Menco's name remained elusive, safe and out of reach. This fueled Harfuca's anger and his drive for revenge. He knew the fight couldn't end until those behind El Cholo's actions paid for their crimes. As the video of El Cholo's frail, fear-stricken confession spread online, Harfuca immediately denied all accusations. He didn't bother with the words of a criminal being held captive by other criminals, and it seemed he knew for certain that those behind El Cholo were none other than CJNG. The cold and determined look in his eyes showed an unwavering confidence. In the video, El Cholo nearly broke down in tears, urging his fellow gang members to abandon the fight and spend more time with their families. With sorrowful eyes, he ended the video with a desperate lament. "Look at me. See how I've ended up?" These words seemed to foreshadow the tragic fate that awaited him. Not long after the video went viral, El Cholo's mutilated body was found tightly wrapped in plastic and placed on a park bench, creating a horrifying scene. He had been shot multiple times in the head, and clear signs of brutal torture were visible on his body before the final bullet ended his suffering. A blood-soaked sign on his chest read, "El Cholo, the traitor." This message served as a chilling warning to anyone who dared to stand against the cruelty of CJNG, a ruthless punishment for those who betrayed them. What are your thoughts on this story? Share your comments below so others can read them. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support me. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.